record
Yeah,
this.
bro.
Okay, this is great. Okay, welcome to this really great lecture that we're having. Uh, so this is going to be the second tech lecture in part of that two-part series, I guess. So please watch the first one if you haven't already, because we kind of just going right into it. Okay, so some prereqs. You need to know tech case structure, meaning uniqueness, links, and uniqueness, links, internal links, impacts. Just know what generally each of these terms mean. Also know how to run a response theory in proper shell form. Know how to write good interps. So if there's a violation that occurs in the round, you're able to effectively write a shell with a good interp. So for example, someone reads a pick with 99% of the F, you're able to come with the interp, the neg cannot read it. The neg, oh, sorry, someone trying to join now. The neg cannot read a pick, and a pick is defined as a CP that adds or subtracts an element of the gov plan. I don't know. It's just a very basic definition, but like you're able to write an interp that at least indicts the neg or indicts the other team of committing some violation. Third, you know what layering is. You know how to say that something comes before something else. You're able to say theories a priori theory comes before the case layer. Even if we lose the case layer and if we win the theory layer round, we still win it because it's a prereq. Okay, so those are the things that were covered kind of in the last lecture. So now it's all, I think, some new stuff, some stuff that you guys already know. So first thing is understanding your judge, and this kind of happens when you get your pairing. You get obviously the paradigm. When you're reading the paradigm, there's a couple of things you want to take note of. The first thing you want to take note of is how much the judge is intervening or how much the judge kind of likes certain arguments. So a lot of judges will say like, I'll consider all arguments if they're not whatever. Like the normal thing is that they're not like racist, sexist, or like harm like certain individuals, which is a very fair bright line. Um, Other judges are like, I just won't buy a claim if it's not true. Like judges will be like, if you say the sky is blue, if you say the sky is purple, I won't buy that, even if it goes dropped. So understand the level of judge intervention that's happening. Second, understand the speed. This also contributes how much you can read in one round. Oh, hello. Sorry. This also, wait, am I stealing your room?
It's okay.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, speed, just like how much you can like deliver, like what's your maximum delivery. This affects how much you can read in each speech because if there's a higher speed, you can read more arguments, et cetera, et cetera. Third, and this is similar to the first one, this is kind of redundant, but how much the judge is preferring tech over truth. I think this lecture is kind of simulated for an evergreen style tournament where you're going to be having judges that kind of buy almost every single argument. And yeah, and fourthly is protection of rebuttal speeches. A lot of judges just automatically protect. They don't want you to call the POO. Most judges don't really protect and they want you to call the POO. But if it starts getting redundant, just ask the judge and ask the panel that like I've already called too many times. Like, can you just protect from now on? They'll probably say yes. General round strat. As you can see, your more technical teammate should be the second speaker in all cases except for an affirmative K or one IC theory because the middle speeches are infinitely harder. What I mean by this is that usually the PMC is very predictable. The PMC is literally just straight advantages. It's like advantage one is advantage two, et cetera, in a tech round. And the neg first speech is going to be like if the neg first speech is some theory shell, then the more unpredictable part of the speech is obviously going to be the second affirmative speech or the MG. And then obviously the PMR is going to be sort of hard, but if your MG doesn't have any offense or drops all the standards of the LOC theory, your PMR is cooked and there's no way to return. So your more technical teammate, the person who's probably more familiar with responding to tech and running tech should be the second speaker in all cases. Then if you look this think about the same thing from the neg perspective, if you're the neg and you're just going to be reading like straight case or something and you're going to be hitting with you're going to usually the PMC is going to be predictable. The then first neg speech is going to be predictable because you're the neg and you want to run straight case. And then the MG or the second affirmative speecher is probably going to whip up some theory shell if it's going to be a tech round. So that means the MO has to respond to all the standards, has to do a lot of the work, which means the second speaker once again does a lot of the work. The only exception once again is in the case of an affirmative K or one C theory, but even then, you can kind of script responses. But like in that case, we'll go over like more specific stuff. But in terms of like an affirmative K or like one C theory, and if you're like completely unprepared, the more technical teammates should go first to respond. Okay. Second is theory K's, case and tricks, what to go for. If you like, hopefully by the end of the lecture, you know how to run, respond to, beat all of these, know how to layer between each of them. So you might be thinking like, okay, which arguments should I run? Like, what's like the best argument? once again, it all depends on the judge. Theory is often the easiest path to picking up free ballots, but judges often hate theory, and even Timothy Zhu is starting to be like, all caps speaks to 28 for running non-T theory. So understand the judge. If the judge is fine with theory, go for that because it's the simplest and cleanest way to win. And K debates and case debates get really messy. But if the judge is explicitly like, I don't like theory, but I really like critical debate, and you have a good critical position you want to run on a topic, then read a K if you're comfortable with that. If you don't, then just read a case. It just depends on how comfortable you are. Once again, theory is just the easiest way to usually win around. Tips for disclosure. Disclosure is when teams disclose they're often reading non-topical positions. These are usually critical positions. Usually you don't disclose you're reading theory shells. You can, but you usually don't because the argument is, oh, we run theory based on what you do in the round. So we can't disclose it ahead of time. Like you can't disclose you're running shoe theory because you didn't know that you're not going to wear shoes to the round until you're actually in the round. But you do know if you're going to be defending a critical position, if you see the topic and you're like, okay, heck no, I'm not debating that. I'm going to debate something else. Or you're like, holy shit, that topic is super capitalist. I'm going to be reading a K. I'm going to be prepping a K. So you can disclose that in prep time. So the way to trick people to get people to disclose, which is kind of counterproductive because I guess this video is going to go online, is to find them before prep, especially Campo and Nueva. And if you get a very hard, like hardcore K judge or even somewhat mildly K teams that most are reading case right now on the circuit are like Sue and Harkavy, some Washington teams. Washington probably like Metin Mohanty. That's probably the only Washington team. And then Nueva teams will definitely read some Ks. Maybe not we and Savla. This is very specific to the time. So if you're very confused, I don't know, like 4 years from now, then don't be. So you just tell them and find your opponent to say, if we read something, if we read like a critical advocacy, we're going to disclose it 2 to 3 minutes in prep. Do you mind if you do the same? Most teams will agree. And so if you end up being topical, you just tell them 2, 3 minutes in, we're going to be topical. And if they're reading a K, they'll say, we're reading a K. And usually you can ask for what K and what's the role of the ballot. So for example, NPDI double octaves, I use the same thing. Campo, I told them we're topical, and Campo said, we're going to be reading a, what is this? Oh, okay, sure, fine, whatever. It's going to be like yeah, Gustav.
So if they don't agree to disclose, what do you do?
You kind of suck it up and skill issue. I mean, the thing is that you don't do it as if like, please save me, like, please help me, like, please disclose, please make the debate fair. You're like almost like intimidating them. You're being like, okay, we're probably gonna run something. Like I'm thinking of running like a capitalist K. But like don't tell them obviously I'm trying to read a capitalist K because that's like that's a little too specific. But think about like say to them, we're thinking about reading a critical position. um, do you mind if we disclose 2 3 minutes within prep? And do you mind if you do the same? And most of them will be like, yes, of course, you're reading a K, you should definitely disclose to us. And they'll agree. And then you say, psych, I'm not reading anything. They'll be like, shit, we're not reading anything, or shit, we're reading a feminist K. What? Who is? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, this is kind of crazy because this is just like, okay, whatever. But I have no way to make sure that only MA people can access. So like, you're fucked anyways. I'll upload this after Evergreen, so like no one has access. Anyways, yeah, so exactly what I just said. That's how you get people to disclose their critical positions. If you're being topical, once again, disclose 2 3 minutes in prep, get the response. This could be really helpful because if they say they're reading affirmative K, you're not going to prep disadvantages because if you prep disadvantages, the case debate doesn't matter anymore because all you have to prep is the responses to the feminist K. You're not prepping response to the topic anymore. Um, what important thing to note though is when we get to the K section, you probably do want to prep TVAs. You want to prep warrants that show what? What happened?
He wants laptop.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go grab it. Oh, sorry. I've like colonized your room.
It's fine.
All right. Perfect. All right. Yeah. So I don't know what I was just saying. What was I just saying? Someone tell me. I don't know what I was just saying. Yeah. Don't raise
I
your
think
hand to speak. Yeah.
prep TVAs.
Oh, TVAs. Yeah. So, yeah. So TVAs are, and I'll get into this later, but they are affirmatives. Like, for example, the topic is, Saudi Arabia should join BRICS, which is the feminist topic. And then they say like, okay, it's impossible to defend this resolution as the affirmative because if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS, all like the lives of all the women are going to be like destroyed. Like all the women are like, so it's impossible to defend this. Thus, we're going to be running a feminist critique. a TVA says that the affirmative in fact can defend the resolution, and it's like a plan text. So Saudi Arabia can join BRICS, or Saudi Arabia will join BRICS, and then actually this will help women's rights. So actually it will turn and it won't harm women, it will actually help women. So there's no reason for you to be running this critique, because you can actually instead affirm the resolution, and you can provide like, you don't, there's no reason for you to reject the resolution. Yeah, Gustav, you're raising your hand. Or is that random?
Oh, sorry, I have an additional question.
Yeah.
Pertaining to TVAs, like what does that stand for?
A topical version of the affirmative.
Helpful version.
Yeah, I'll
Uh,
get,
and then
yeah.
and then my second question was about an earlier topic. So you said if they disclose like if they're running a feminist K or something, and you
Mhm.
spend all of prep time trying to prep against that, but then turns out like at the very end of prep they said, "Oh, never mind, we're not running it anymore." What happens?
It's that's like a big asshole move. I have never seen someone do that. I think debater, it's like saying like, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to suck it up and debate, because once again, like if they're really assholes, like the problem with Parley is that if people are like really, really like sick in the head, they can really cook you up. Like in prep, they can tell you, we're reading this like roll of the ballot, we're reading like, I don't know, like an Orientalism critique, give you the text, and then not read it in round. And then you say, well, they told us we're reading an Orientalism critique. They're like, no, we never told you that. How do you verify? Like you literally, so this is called non-verifiability. Like you can't verify that they told you that. But that's such like that's like I have never seen something like that happen. I mean, supposedly someone could do that, but that's just like that's like you debate on your feet at that point. But like, okay, like I mean, you could. I mean, maybe for disclosure, you could have like a witness or something, but they can be like, oh, the witness was like paid off. Like, I don't know. Like, it gets like like you kind of have to debate in your own, but like that's really messed up. Yeah, messed up.
When you said the thing about like affirming solves better than negating because of like Saudi Arabia, whatever, isn't like the thesis of some of those cases that like negating is harmful, so we should reject the res, or like affirming is harmful, so we should reject the res?
I mean, I mean, all you're trying to do is you're trying to remove the link to reading the affirmative K. So, um, a reason to read the affirmative K is not that negating is harmful, because the neg could very well say like, could read a CP, right? So there isn't actually like like I don't I've never seen an affirmative K where the link is that negating is harmful. Usually the link to the affirmative K is that affirming is very harmful, and that we can't affirm the resolution. But I mean, if the link was that negating was harmful, the response would be that the neg can read CPs to solve for the app better. Yeah, wait. Go ahead. Are you raising your hand? Oh no. Okay. Perfect. So that was a bit of a tangent. Now we'll go back into the agenda that was kind of prescribed. Okay. So kind of structure this into like pre-case, top of case, tech case, and then theory, critiques, tricks. So first is pre-case positions. I don't know. This is probably isn't an actual term. I just call it pre-case position because you kind of read it before the case. And these are kind of independent or regardless of case. Theory hedge is the first pre-case position, and theory hedge is the argument that a certain side, a certain side, is harder to debate than the other. Um, this usually means like, okay, the two obviously situations, because it's a binary, are affirming is harder than negating, and negating is harder than affirming. What you're trying to get out of this is to say that there is already existing fairness bias in the round towards one side. Thus, you should prioritize our theory first, or thus you should disregard their theory, because it just makes up for the fairness, for the lack of fairness in the debate to begin with. For example, um, in the affirming is harder than negating shell, one of the reasons is, so affirming is harder than negating. One of the reasons is time skew, that the PMR is only 5 minutes, but the neg has an 8 minute block plus a 4 minute collapse to literally generate infinite offense, which I believe is actually like very real. Like if you look at all flow debate, it's a very like, I don't know, there might be like percentages in stats somewhere, but like from my personal experience, the neg has a super, super high like win rate. And in non-tech debate and flow debate, that neg win rate is really, really high. Regardless of whether that argument is true or not, the argument is that because it's so much harder to affirm than it is to negate, you should do some things as the judge. One, you should not allow the neg to read theory on fairness, because whatever unfairness we commit is just to make up for that existing unfairness in the round. But secondly, like priorities, whatever, like I don't know, like there's some implications like presumption, flips affirmative, like if there's no offense in the round, make us like, for example, like imagine this: if the neg starts over here and the af starts over here, and they both end up in the same position, that means the af did more work to earn the ballot. Thus, the ballot should be awarded to the affirmative in the case of a tie, which is presumption. So yeah, just the general argument of theory hedge is one side is harder to affirm than the other. There are a couple of reasons why, and then here's what you should do as a judge. And usually those reasons are wickedly, wickedly unfair that it'll make like it make life almost impossible as the other team. So when you're responding to theory hedge, you have to one either state it's not true, like there's no existing side bias, or the flip side, one side is harder than the other, and then respond to the warrants. So in terms of time skew, there's two responses to time skew. One, you can say there's other things that outweigh time skew, like psychological bias, because the affirmative has the first and the last speech, which means that as humans, instead of being like debaters, as humans, it actually ties it more deeply, because if we hear something first and then we hear something last, we're more prone to believe it. Thus, the affirmative already has a psychological bias. This outweighs time skew, which you have to say. This outweighs time skew because psychological bias affects us how we think or psychological or whatever, like give some warrant. And then secondly, you can say that like, I don't know, like the the affirmative can the affirmative can read like very hyper specific plans and shift out all the neg offense, which kills prep. Like really, like this theory hedge debate becomes a wash in a lot of situations when both sides do it well, which means it's usually only used as a time suck or it's like a free win argument. It's just like an argument that teams toss out there to just kind of win the round. And if you drop it, you kind of lose. But if you respond to it, usually teams will just kick it and not go for it because it's mostly used as a time suck argument. But you can also very well win this if you know what you're talking about. Like the psychological bias outweighs everything else is a strong point. You can also win off the fact that now I'm literally forgetting my own theory hedge. Like you can also win off the fact that like yeah, affirming like because if the planet says the USFG should send military aid to Pakistan, the affirmative can say, okay, we can send $2 in aid, we can send $5 in aid, we can send $10 billion in aid. The neg response to these arguments generally varies, and we don't know what the number is until the round starts. Thus, even though you might have 12, minutes of time skew within the round, you have 20 minutes of prep skew, right? Which far outweighs anything else. I don't know. You can make some argument. Yeah, that's theory hedge. Secondly is 1SC theory, which is very uncommon, and I think the only 1SC theory shell I've well, like there's like it has to be irrelevant of what the neg says, unless the neg says something racist before the round. But in that case, you'd probably read like an IBI. But 1SC theory is usually shoe theory, like camera off theory, which actually I saw a Washington team running that, so you might actually hit camera off theory this weekend. These are like really, really stupid shells, and they can usually very easily be won. And most of the time, like if you give like once again, like if you know how to respond to theory, go over the standards, go over the voters, and read an RBI on 1SC theory usually, because it's usually like stupidly ridiculous. I don't know. As a response to camera off theory, like because they spend like literally like there's so many responses to camera off theory, but like I think the worst case scenario you could say there's literally like a no solve, because it's going to contribute like, okay, I mean the argument would be like if you mitigate climate change by like 0.0001%, you save like millions of lives. But like you can argue that's like not true, because if we truly were to minimize our whatever, if we really truly were to minimize our like contribution to the environment, we wouldn't even be debating in the first place. Like literally, we would not even debate, because that would save all of our computer storage. And if that's more like similar, like if that's like the highest priority in the round, then thus by even being here and by debating, like the neg bites into their own shell. Also, you can say like it's probably more important to have your camera on and to like engage with other people than like trying to mitigate climate change by like this much, because it's like whatever. And you can like outweigh and you can read like your counter interpret better than their answer. Anyway, that's a stupid shell. Then the third thing you can do in pre-case positions is preemptive layering. And this is think about in the first gov speech, so in the PMC, and you anticipating you want to read MG theory. So you want to read, I don't know, like CP's bad, or you want to read some sort of theory shell in the second affirmative speech. But you also anticipate that the negative is going to read some theory shell in their first negative speech. So what do? So if you A, anticipate that, or B, just like want to be safe, you read preemptive layering in the PMC, saying always value MG theory or always value affirmative theory over negative theory. and give like reason to prefer. Like one reason to prefer is like time trade-off because of the time skew, because the like LOC theory is like almost like infinitely busted because of the block. MG theory is kind of hard to uplayer over LOC theory, but you can say like, yeah, the time skew argument is a good one. Another argument is that the AF doesn't have access to like the neg is the first speech that it already has. It's inherently what AFC. Yeah, AFC is run as like AFC is run as AFC equals. Okay, I should write this. AFC equals affirmative framework choice, and it's run in the 1AC as usually a preemptive theory shell, or it's run as just like warrants to prefer. So the argument is, like, for example, if you read, okay, the framework should be deontology. I mean, I should have like an AFC shell. Yeah, I mean, this is Celtics thing. But yeah, as you can see, it's mostly just fairness. It's mostly just time skew and strat skew. So the argument is that, and I'll link all of these later, but like the argument is that if you give negative the framework choice, they will have an overwhelming advantage that will allow them to win like almost every round, which is just unfair. It's a stupid argument. But yeah, that's like it's run as preemptive theory. So it's like if they try to challenge our framework, they violate our shell. And so MG gets like violation offense. So it kind of tries to scare them from like doing from challenging framework, which is like really stupid. But okay, whatever. Preemptive layering, once again, is just, and also you can do it in the LOC. In the LOC, if you predict that they're going to read MG theory and you want to read first negatives, like if you want to read theory on the first negative speech and you anticipate they're going to read theory in the second government speech, then you read layering, LOC theory or negative theory over affirmative theory. And you can say reason to prefer one is order because it's the most real world, because court systems evaluate arguments in the way in which they're presented. Argument A gets evaluated first and then argument B, which means argument A, in this case, which is LOC theory, which comes first, has to be evaluated first. Something like that. Anyways, these are just reasons to prefer. And once again, I'll link a bunch of like layering stuff later. Okay, that's like pre-K stuff. Any questions? Gustav, any questions? Do you get all this?
No, I'm good. Actually, a little bit confused about the AFC.
Okay, yeah. So,
Um,
yeah. What's this?
why can't neg refute the framework?
Well, yeah, that's why it's a stupid shell. The argument is the standards are time skew. So you know how the neg gets an 8-4 time, like 8-4 speech times, and then the PMR is 5 minutes. So
yeah.
The argument is the neg can spread out the AF in the block. And the only way to correct back for that time skew, and this is very similar to the head sheet, the theory head sheet, but the only way to correct back against the time skew is to have an affirmative framework choice. So it says,
okay, but
yeah,
AF lays the framework in the first speech, and they still have the MG to expand on.
Yeah, but the argument is that the neg is advantaged at the start of the debate run. In the whole debate run, the neg is advantaged because they have this amount of time to generate arguments. And because ultimately what matters, not the first speeches, but the last speeches. And the neg has 2 last speeches compared to 1, right? Because it is 8-4 with no rebuttal to the 8, right? So the argument is, okay, neg is super cracked. Neg has like, I don't know, like a crazy win rate. Okay, and then Bess is going to be like, okay, it actually doesn't have a neg win rate. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I actually have a good doc as a response to that. Yeah, the way you can easily beat AFC is by saying, A, there is no existing like fairness offense to both sides. Like both sides start equally fair, or just non-verifiable what's fair and not what's not fair, because each side has an advantage. Like the AF speaks first and last, and the neg has a time skew. How do you compare the two? Like we have no idea. Thus, like the shell doesn't even make sense. There's no precedent to give just the AF an advantage. Secondly, you can say clash. Like clash is key to debate and key to education. If we can't ever like respond to the AF framework, the AF framework can be like, the role of the ballot is to vote for the affirmative, and then the neg can't check back against that, which means the AF is going to have auto ballots, which is just unfair because it kills all of our education, and education is the internal link to fairness. And even say that fairness is there because that means one side's winning every single round, which means the debate isn't fair, right? That's the response to AFC. I don't think people are going to read AFC, but yeah, that's the response. Do you get that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do the POI. Remind me of the POI stuff when I'm covering theory a little bit. Okay. Two is top of case. And whenever you're doing top of case, you always want to give a roll of the ballot. If you're, I'm assuming most people are going to be reading case. If case, I would say just actually generally for every single roll of the ballot, I would say to avoid messiness and to avoid confusion, just go the roll of the ballot. Then Kai, you can correct me. Is the I think it's the roll of the ballot is to vote or is to weigh the all-inclusive impacts of the affirmative versus the negative. Is that correct? I mean, it's something like that. Anyways, the argument you make is that usually the role of the ballot is like weigh the feminist materialist impacts to like, I don't know, socio-physiological, like whatever, some random thing. So you're like, okay, you should, instead of just considering the feminist impacts of sociological well-being of like women, you should be weighing the all-inclusive impacts of the affirmative versus the negative. And the reason to prefer here is going to be silencing. And the reason is that if we choose certain ideologies over others, this just sets a like dangerous precedent. So if you're only valuing like the sociological, physiological impacts to women, how about like, I don't know, racism experienced by like African Americans, or like, I don't know, like something else, some intersectional identity that becomes erased because you only choose to focus on one thing. Thus, the way to solve is to weigh the all-inclusive impacts of everything versus everything. Thus, we don't silence anything. That's a shit roll of the ballot, because then the response to the post-fiat policy option is like, okay, then you silence all our like pre-fiat stuff, like, and then you're just like, you're facing it like a really up, like you're facing an uphill battle, because you're trying to silence the critique. You're trying to say you can't weigh the critique because you can only weigh post-fiat and you can only weigh the status quo. The best way to beat it is to just say this, and to say your critique gets evaluated in this framework, because that's an all-inclusive impact. You just have to prove the critique comes before the theory and the critique actually has solvency through the alternative. So I would choose this roll of the ballot any day, because it's super easy to argue, right? Like it's like ridiculously easy to win this roll of the ballot. Okay. And then Tricot. Tricot, obviously, just policy. Ethan Park sometimes tries to shift out of it by doing like, this round is a fact round, thus I don't need a plan text, thus it's this to prove the resolution true. I mean, I don't think people are going to do that, but if so, just have the word should means a call to action. A call to action is defined as policymaking. Prefer the first dictionary entry above everything else. And then you don't have to run a theory shell. You can just contest it. But I mean, if they don't provide a plan text, then you can run a theory shell on the app didn't provide a plan text. But yeah. Then the plan text. Plan text is going to be, oh yeah, Gustav.
Sorry. On occasion, the word should can also indicate value round, right?
Yes, but you can like, yeah. I mean, usually the value rounds are the word ought, but if it's clearly some policy action, like the state of California should do something, if there's an inherent actor and there's something to do, it should be a policy round, right? But if it's like if it's some action, like if it's any sort of action, it's a policy round. It doesn't have to be like like I don't know. This house believes that people should do X when Y. That's a policy round. That's not a value round, because you're doing some action. Or like, I mean, I guess you could be interpreted as like a value round because it believes that. But like, there's not going to be this house at Evergreen. That's like garbage. It's going to be like pretty straightforward. And I think most rounds are going to be policy. It's going to be blank should do blank. That should be policy round. Weighing mechanism. Oh yeah, sorry. Combating spec. So your plan text is going to be an actor, and I think agent enforcements are like ridiculously stupid, so I guess I'll put it down. But like, it's literally like the most stupid thing in the world. Funding, which includes total, includes amount plus mechanism, and then you're going time frame. And I would say this is not just to combat spec shells, but also it helps you like shift out of a lot of neg disadvantages. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say you have a plan that's like the US should send $50 billion to Pakistan. And I don't know, the neg comes up and says, no, this is gonna, this is gonna like raise our debt, and we already have so much debt, and blah 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 blah. And you're like, we don't fund this plan through deficit spending. We fund this plan through raising taxes, right? And so we raise taxes on this specific thing, which means we don't. Your entire disadvantage is just non. It's just it doesn't even address our advantage. So by being specific with the mechanism, you can a shift out of neg prep, and two, you can avoid spec, which is pretty nice, and it doesn't take that long to. I mean, I would understand like different ways to fund a plan, and if you come up with really like niche ones, I think judges would like appreciate that. Like, I don't know, like we would get rid of this bill and put all the funding there. Like, I don't know, that would be pretty cool, especially.
Yeah. How is this not extra topical if you start doing that?
um I would say it's considered. I mean, you would have the debate under that, but then the AF would never be able to provide a funding mechanism because for anything you would have to pass some policy. So there is no bright line because you would have to say, okay, in order to raise taxes, you have to change the legislature to increase taxes. Is that a new policy? Is that also extra topical? Like the way of even if you deficit spend, you have to allocate more money to write the bill of like deficit spending and to pass it over. Is that also new policy? So there's no like, as long as like the advantage doesn't come through like I don't know. I think you can beat extra T, but like I think you can make the argument that as long as you're not getting any impacts of decreasing funding there, or I mean, I guess you would get impacts. I don't know. I think just beat the theory shell. I mean, I think you would win off this slippery slope thing where everything is just an additional plan. Wait, Gusa, do you sort of okay? It's sort of confusing what we're saying. Do you kind of get it?
Yeah, I do. I just don't get how you can fiat closing another policy in order to fund another one.
Yeah, that might be a little sketchy. I would say like, but a very common method of funding plans is like removing all the funding from F-35 fighter jets. Is that extra topical? Maybe. Like I don't know. Maybe it is. That's actually a valid debate to have whether that's an extra topical offense or it's not. Because I can think of arguments for it being both sides. Because like what's not extra topical funding? Like literally what's not? Like every single plan that you fund, you have to pass some new policy or some new bill in order to like you can just say it's part of the AF to do the
I
plan.
think if you do normal ways and means, that's just the plan, or like that's just the res. But if you specify something that the government usually doesn't do, then you're like that's not the resolution anymore.
You,
That's my take.
okay, like the government usually like what like and what does the government usually do to fund stuff like
I don't know.
okay, well then maybe it'd be worth it to look into how the government usually funds this kind of stuff. And then you can say this is just under normal ways and means because of historical precedent. That could be a good way to do it. Like
Yeah.
like I think during
But
yeah.
as a rule of thumb, you probably shouldn't use the funding for impacts, right? Like you can say we're taking money out of the military, and because we're doing that to fund this, less people are going to die, right? You can't say that.
Hmm, I would run theory against that. Okay, like I think what Kai just said is a good point. I don't think I would venture too I would raise some suspicions. I would suggest the way you choose a funding mechanism is if especially if it's like foreign aid, search up, take a minute. How does the government fund foreign aid? And just literally use that mechanism. That's about it. And you can say, this is how the government always has funded the plan. This is not extra topical. And you can maybe even you can get advantages off that funding, right? And if the funding truly is cutting down from the military, then you can provide the warrant. Then that's how that's and you can give warrants like I don't know when we sent military aid to Cuba in the 1950s, we cut down the military aid by this much, and that would shut down all extra T offense. Okay. Yeah. So actor agent enforcement funding time frame, and obviously the plan itself. So the plan itself is literally just the res, but should is replaced with will. So the U.S. should send aid to Pakistan will be replaced with the U.S. will send 50 will plus a like plus specifics. So we'll send $50 billion to Pakistan, like something like that, in something aid. You can be as specific as you want it to be. And the really fun part about affirmatives is you don't have to always generically defend the resolution. Like if it's the US should send aid to Pakistan, you're like, the US should send $50 billion of aid to Pakistan. You can be like, no, the US should send, I don't know, like $10 billion of aid in education packages or something. And that's not extra topical. That's just hyper specific within an app. And there's something called nebulty. I can say nebulty, which is the argument that the affirmative must defend the whole resolution. Yes, is overspec legit? Yeah, I mean nebulty and overspec are like the same thing. I think you could argue that most arguments for the neg should like be anticipating where like the funding should be going. And once again, like it's kind of just like a skill issue. Like you can just argue that like fairness, like there's a lot of ways, like even if they prove, even if you prove that that strategy is unfair, you can still win the debate by saying this is super educational and we're going super deep and fairness doesn't matter. So the debate doesn't end if they prove that your arguments were unfair. Your debate doesn't end if they prove that you are being hella abusive. Because if you win that this is a super educational thing, or this outweighs on something else, or fairness is non-unique, fairness doesn't matter, then their theory isn't even legit in the first place. Like there's no indictment. Okay. Yeah, weighing mechanisms, you can choose like random stuff. I would just stick with net benefits. I mean, I don't think there's anything. Util net benefits. You might run into something called I'm literally just covering all my bases. I'm sure you're never gonna hit this, but net spec, which is normative ethical theory spec, which is an argument that the affirmative must provide an ethical theory as a weighing mechanism. So this means net benefits is not an ethical theory because what's net benefits? The greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. I mean, that's Breyer's kid definition, but that's really a definition. In that definition, what is good? Like, how do you quantify good? So that's why utilitarianism is the ethical theory. Net benefits is not, because it could be deontological net benefits, right? But its net benefits isn't really anything. Like, look, that's a valid shell. Like, look at that. That's not that bad. Like, that's not the worst shell. But if you say util, that kind of just like solves for everything. Because you just say util is like, I guess util is also amount of good, but it's like specifically, maybe you can go like hedonism, like pleasure. But yeah, good stuff.
So what are the standards for net spec?
It'd be okay. I'm thinking it would probably be like moving target. Like it could be any ethical theory. Also it could be like destroys philosophy education, because we just be generic and we aren't actually, like, the point of debate is to learn about like the nuance. And if every single round people are saying net benefits, without understanding what actually net benefit it is too, we're just promoting bad education in the debate space. And education is important because blah 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 blah. Okay. And then yeah. Tech case. Okay. Yeah, okay. Any questions on top of case stuff? Or move on. This doesn't appear again. Actually, it'll probably appear again. Okay, anyways. Then tech case work. So counterplans. So whenever you read a counterplan as the neg, you have to just follow the same procedures as you would do for a regular plan, which means providing an actor, providing a time frame, et cetera, providing a plan text, because you can get CP spec run on you as well. Then whenever someone reads a counterplan, what you have to do is usually you wait until the counterplan is done and then you interrupt. You literally just unmute. Like, let's say, I don't know, Gustav's reading the counterplan and I'm muted and I'm just flowing. And he's reading like the counterplan, he's reading everything. Yeah. So exactly. Oh, wait, I just, why did I just have a brain fart? Oh, yes. So after they finish reading the counterplan, you interrupt and just yell text and status. I should write this down. Interrupt after the counterplan and yell text and status if they don't provide one. So a text is a written text of the CP. So you have it and the judge has it. So in person, that's usually like a written piece of paper you want them to pass. And online is over the Zoom chat. Status is the status of the advocacy. Is it conditional? Is it dispositional? Or is it uncondo? Dispositional is pretty fake. It's usually just condo or uncondo. I would say 50% of CPs are condo and 50% of CPs are uncondo from my experience. So condo is you can kick the CP at any time through the round. Like if you feel in the MO you're getting kind of cooked on your CP and your CP is actually kind of ass and you're rethinking it, then you can be like, we never had that CP. Like that's gone. Instead, we're going to defend the SQO again. No, like literally, like at NPDI, 50% of the rounds the CPs went against were condo. I'm not talking about lay debate. Okay, lay debate, all of them are on condo, obviously. I mean, it might be, okay, anyways, off track. Uncondo is you have to stick with the CP through the entirety of the round, right? So you have to. You can't kick it or anything if you're losing it. Judge kicking, once again, this is very, very nuanced. Judge kicking is an argument that given a condo, I think it's given condo, but could work for uncondo. No, I think it's for only condo. If the status of the counterplan is condo, and the end of the round, the neg hasn't kicked the CP, so the neg continues to defend the CP through its entirety. The judge may evaluate the status quo as an option of the negative, even if they haven't explicitly kicked the CP. This is called judge kicking. Like the judge does the kicking for you. The judge kicks the CP for you as a means to evaluate. Most judges don't do this. Some judges say, I judge kick, which means I judge kick by default, which means you probably want to make an argument as the AF, don't judge kick because it's bad. We can't predict. I don't know, something like that. Just like if it says in their paradigm, or just generally just say don't judge kick. Yeah, that's for counterplans. So make sure if you read a counterplan, you have all like the specifications, and if you're against a counterplan, you're getting the status and the text, and well now perms. If the CP is mutually exclusive, then you can perm it. If the CP is part of the affirmative, like if, for example, the topic is the US should send military aid to Pakistan, and the AF says we're going to send $20 billion of aid, and the next says no, we're going to only send $10 billion of aid because that's our CP. You can run a severance perm where you take your plan and you shrink it down to the neg because it still fits the resolution, and you can say that effectively is okay. And this actually bias to the next thing. Perms are by default tests of competition and not an advocacy. What this means is that in that situation I gave of $20 billion versus $10 billion, the advocacy doesn't become $10 billion. That just means the neg CP is invalid. That means the neg CP doesn't count because it's once again, perms are a test of competition. You read a perm saying you can't read this advocacy because we can do it too. That doesn't mean your advocacy shifts to whatever they do. It stays the same, but that means their CP gets dropped and they're back to defending the status quo. However, you can make arguments saying that perms are advocacies, which most judges don't default to. Most judges default to test of competition. You can say perms are advocacies, meaning your advocacy shrinks down to 10 billion and they don't have an advocacy anymore because we advocate for the same thing. Most of the time it's just a test of competition. An intrinsic perm is when you add something to the plan. So for example, if I don't know, the topic that like if it's $20 billion and they're like, okay, we should add $30 billion, an intrinsic perm would be an intrinsic perm would say whatever. The test of competition doesn't work because we can add it and that's still affirming the resolution. Okay. Yeah. Just the biggest thing to note is this because nobody gets this on the circuit. Oh my God. Wait. Nobody gets this on the circuit. Test of competition versus an advocacy. Okay. Then link turns and impact turns. This is just kind of responding to case. When they give you uniqueness, and I think this is probably a better way to do it, winning the uniqueness. So whenever there's an advantage or there's a disadvantage, for an advantage, you need to prove the status quo is bad. Or you need to prove explicitly that the status quo needs some improvement because as judges have told me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Because if the uniqueness isn't there, if the world isn't bad, then why are we risking so much to pass a new policy, right? So you need to prove something is somewhere bad. And most topics, that'll be really easy to find. So once again, you'll hear this term, uniqueness controls the direction of the link. If the uniqueness is good, the link is going to be to the disadvantage because if the uniqueness is good, the uniqueness is going to flow towards the disadvantage because it's more risky to enact the affirmative. If the uniqueness is bad, the uniqueness is going to flow towards the affirmative link because you need to fix the status quo. Then the link turns, if you're responding to links, like let's say by the US giving $20 billion to Pakistan, the US funds the police, and the police create a great and stable world, which saves a bunch of lives. A link turn would say that by funding the police, for example, you create more authoritarian crackdown, which leads to more suffering and more like, I don't know, something like that. That's a link term. You just literally turn the link, you take the link and you just flip it. An impact turn is if they say, we'll fund the police, which creates a more safer environment, and the safer environment is really good. An impact turn is not to say funding the police doesn't create a safe environment. You argue that a safe environment is a bad environment. So you're taking the impact and you're actually flipping it. Impact turns are really hard because most impacts are like good impacts, like, I don't know, we save lives, I don't know, something. But if it's an impact that you're like, wait, we can actually argue that that impact is a bad impact, or you really are screwed because the link is really strong, then just go over the impact turn. Safety is bad because whatever, it compromises all our freedom or whatever, and then just read like, I don't know, read some impact turn. Very important to don't double turn. Don't say the link is bad and then the impact is bad, because you think about it, if you flip both, you're just once again indicting yourself. Like if you think about it logically, that's just how it works. I can explain the logic, but I'm not going to do that. Then theory work on case abuse. Yeah. So if you feel the CP is really utopian and the CP is like, damn, that's a good CP, and the CP is like that's just the most niche CP ever, I have no idea how to respond, probably read theory against it. Probably say the neg, then either the neg may not read a CP. Yeah, 1 second. Or the neg may not read this CP, the text of the CP, when the topic is this. Either way, if this specific one, you have specific standards why it's abusive, or if you want to generically just read CP's bad theory, this is pre-prepped. Like you can probably memorize the shell. This requires you to think in round, which it depends on whichever one is probably better for you. Terminalizing, yeah, this is straight from Timothy Drew's paradigm, actually. You really need to make sure that you terminalize to death, dehumanization, quality of life. Suffering is probably terminalized, but don't just stop at economy, etc. Don't even stop at like more drugs for people, or like more life-saving drugs. In a tech run, literally go to extinction, genocide, like mass death, quality of life decrease, dehumanization, like tangible stuff. Shadow standards are new, so call them POs. If they bring up something in the first speech and then their last speech, but don't bring it up in the middle, call it up. Say to just call. So the way you call the PO is point of order, stopping time. This argument is a shadow extension brought up in the first speech, never extended in the second speech, and then brought up in the final speech. Whatever. Wow, I have a lot to get through. Okay. Wait. I low-key might have to go. But I might continue this in like, I don't know, a couple of hours, which I might have to drive. Yeah, good stuff.
About POing shadow extensions, what about if it's in the pop block, like the last off speech?
That's still a shadow extension. So think about it this way. If the neg block, if you can bring up new points in the LOR that were not brought up in the MO, think about what would happen then. That's just a 12-minute speech, right? Because what they can do is they can say, okay, the MO covered 8 minutes of offense. Splitting the block. Sure. So splitting the block is exactly what Gustav just asked. It's bringing up new points in the LOR that aren't brought up in the MO. So splitting the block is very abusive because like imagine there's like 4 theory shells in the round, like 4 theory shells. The MO is 8 minutes. And let's say the MO knows they can split the block. The MO can cover 2 theory shells, or maybe even 3 in great detail. And the LOR can say, extend all the MO. I'm going to now focus on the theory shell that went dropped. And then the PMR has 5 minutes. They have 5 minutes to respond to 12 minutes of unique offense. It's pretty bad. So the reason why a new point in the like a POO is for like LOR stuff is because the way POOs control that is because they shorten it down to a 4-minute collapse. So it becomes more manageable. Like it still heavily favors the neg because all the responses are made, but you can bring up new stuff. So instead of like being 12-5, it's like 8-5. Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, so what if the gov drops a contention from the opposition side and then second opposition speaker doesn't even talk about it, and then in your final speech you say, they dropped this contention.
Yeah, that's a chat extension. That's pretty new.
Okay, but like why is that? I mean, I guess, yeah, it's a lot to cover.
So imagine if there's 5 contentions.
Wait, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I understand.
So, okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, the general thumb, if it's not brought up in all 3 speeches, you can't bring it up. Or if it's not brought up in the 2 speeches, you can bring it up in your final speech. Okay. Or sorry, if it's not brought up in the speech right before it for the final speech, if it's not brought up in the MG or the MO, you can't talk about it. How's that? Or I guess you can just find a new stuff. Okay, whatever. You get the argument. Okay. What can I cover anything that's like simple? Okay, passing texts. Yeah, so whenever you write a theory shell, you write a roll the ballot. So the texts you pass are roll the ballots, theory interps, so counter interps included, and text, plan text. Wait, like 5 minutes. These are the things that you're passing. Is there anything else you pass? I don't think so. Kai, anything else that you pass?
I don't think so. By the way, Tristan Keen's just entered the Evergreen judge pool, but so did a parent judge from San Marin.
No, I saw. They're gonna change it up. I'll make sure they change it up. Okay. Presumption arguments. Okay, why not? I'll go over this. So, 2018, there's a very famous trick going around. The argument was as follows. It's called Stolreit's paradox. I'm saying it correctly. It's called the sand paradox. The paradox is premise 1 is that n grains of sand is a heap of sand. So 1,000,000 grains of sand is a heap of sand. It's defined as a heap of sand. Premise 2 is that n minus 1 grains of sand is still a heap of sand. So 999,999 grains of sand is still a heap. Thus, repeated application of premise 2 to premise 1 indicates that 0 grains of sand is a heap of sand, which is not a heap of sand, which means that the English language is false in its nature because it cannot describe objects. Thus, as a judge, you cannot evaluate what's true and what's false. Thus, you auto vote negative on presumption. Okay, so how do you respond to that? I'm curious. As someone that's probably never heard this before.
I mean, like, there's no bright line to what a heap is, right?
Because that's the argument. So the argument is you can extend this to the USFG. The USFG is the same as the USFG without 1 senator. It's the same without 2 senators, all the way up till n senators, which means the USFG doesn't exist. Thus, you can't take action. Thus, everything is true and false at the same time.
Doesn't that invite nihilism?
What?
Doesn't that encourage nihilism?
But you're not responding to the truism of the argument. I'm not saying what ideologies that perpetuates. I'm asking you to disprove whether that's true or whether that's false.
No way, Kai.
What? Yeah, okay. There's 2 responses that are very nice. The first response is the English language isn't a binary, like heap or not a heap. There are things called bigger heaps, smaller heaps. You can phenotypically describe things, for example, which means that it doesn't actually indite anything because n minus 1 grains of sand is a smaller heap, right? You can say it's a 1 grain smaller heap of sand. Or you don't even have to use heap, right? Then the second response is, it's similar to what Vesa said actually, but it justifies it justifies like Holocaust denial, which is actually the response that was given in the 2018 TOC semis, which is that dictators can use this logic to say, okay, we killed 1 person, that's the same as 0. We killed 2 people, that's the same as 0. We killed 1 billion people, that's the same as 0. Thus, nobody was killed. So if you vote for that ideology, you perpetuate literally like misinformation, Holocaust denial, like lots of bad things. As the judges that are reasonable, as humans that are reasonable, you can't vote for an argument like this. And the other team was so scared they had to back. Like they literally was like we can see this argument isn't like they were trying to concede the paradox isn't true, so you can't evaluate it. But the other team was like, yeah, actually the paradox like might be true, which means if you evaluate their argument, then you're whatever. It was literally like an IVI. Yeah, good stuff.
All right, I'm curious, which round specifically, like what was the text that enabled this conversation to occur?
What was the text or topic or
Or like what specific resolution was it that had this argument?
oh, it was. I mean, do you want me to? I mean, the resolution didn't matter. It was just a generic argument. The round, if you
Send aid to Egypt, though.
what?
Send aid to Egypt.
Yeah, send aid to Egypt. It was NPD 2018 TOC semis. All those versus wait. Yeah. There's also a crazy round like that. There's a quarters round, which is one of the most insane things ever. Probably one of the most insane rounds. Yeah, it did include a very familiar head sheet. The head sheet was ass though. I changed it up. Then permissibility. I don't feel like talking about permissibility. This thing can take too long. Okay, Kai, do you want to explain permissibility?
Bruh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's just you first say it relies on a couple premises. First, you have to say that the AF has to prove a moral obligation in order to prove the res. So usually it's like when the topic says ought, but you can also say like should also indicates a moral obligation. And then you say that the second premise is that the AF can't prove a moral obligation, which is usually through, oh, they said the weighing mechanism should be utilitarianism, but you can't make an actual calculation under utilitarianism. Thus, like if you can't make the calculus, then you can't prove the moral obligation, since your moral obligation under utilitarianism is to maximize pleasure. But if you can't calculate what is going to maximize pleasure, you also you can't prove a moral obligation. Thus, the AF hasn't proved the topic is true.
Right. So the argument just boils down to utilitarianism fails. Like utilitarianism doesn't work. And the main argument is dropping my pencil right now can cause nuclear war in 10 billion years, and we would have no way of verifying it. We have no idea of what consequences lead to more consequences. It's an infinitely regressive loop. There are things that we can't even consider confounding variables here and there. Also, do we count one life saved? How do we count one life saved versus 50 lives saved in the future? Like utilitarian calculus becomes impossible. Thus, if we prove it's impossible, you can't ever weigh the affirmative, and thus the affirmative hasn't met the burden of proving an obligation to the plan. Thus, you vote negative. Yeah, those are some tricks. But main thing with tricks is that usually time sucks, really, really like BS, and you can beat them by just like engaging with the line by line. Don't drop stuff in tricks, especially with tech tricks. Like don't drop stuff because you can like people think they'd be like, oh, this is a stupid argument. Like, of course, Judge, you aren't going to buy this. No, you're going to lose. You're going to lose the round. Just engage in the line by line. Yeah, good stuff.
So why is passing text under this trick section?
Oh, I just said like tricky stuff. It wasn't like tricks. I don't know. I didn't have a better place to put it. I don't know. It's not. I don't know. I don't know why it's there. Okay. Case theory, case stuff. Yikes. Okay. I'll go over how much I can go over.
Talk about another POI thing.
Oh, POI stuff, but that's theory. Okay, I'll go over theory quickly. So, I mean, I went over theory pretty detailed last time. Only thing I didn't cover was like spirit over text. Spirit is like what the spirit generally of the interp is, like what do you think it means, like reasonably as a human. Text is like what it actually says. It's like kind of like the loose versus strict interpretation of the Constitution. We meets are like, so there's different ways to we meet. Instead of saying we meet, you can also say that they don't meet. And because both teams violate, there's no offense of the shell. You can also say it's impossible to meet. Like humans must fly before going to the debate round. Like obviously you violate. Like obviously you violate. Or you can be like humans must give $10 billion to charity before entering the debate round. The standards, one, blah, 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 solves all dehumanization, solves all poverty. And be like, this is impossible to meet because I don't have $10 billion. So impossible to meet arguments are just like, it's impossible to not violate. Layering, very important. LLC theory over entry theory over LLC theory. Rounds are won here. Like every judge will tell you that poor layering or like good layering wins the rounds. Yeah, weighing voters. So most of the time, your theory shell offense will come down to fairness and education, or like maybe accessibility. What usually will happen is either both of you will go for fairness offense, in which case you have to prove which one is better for fairness, or one of you will go for education and one of you will go for fairness. And it's important in your final speech to not collapse into fairness and education, but just one voter. Yeah, do stuff.
Does accessibility flow under fairness?
I would say accessibility is a different voter, but yeah, I would say accessibility is a different voter. I mean, it's fundamentally different from fairness, education, and accessibility. I mean, I would say those are three voters. And if there's more voters that are like mutually exclusive to all these, meaning they don't terminalize to those things, those are also voters. Yeah. So skews eval. You can say like, okay, a lack of fairness skews evaluation. So it doesn't matter. So actually you can't evaluate if we're getting a good education or a bad education. So thus, fairness is the internal link to education. You can also say, if we try to maximize fairness, then we just flip a coin and both teams will go home with no education, which means that this is probably a bad model for debate. No one wants to just flip a coin and decide the winner, even though it's the most fair, right? If our goal was to truly maximize fairness, I would just take a coin, flip it, you win, go home. But we get zero education. And the reason why nobody want to do that, and the reason why it wouldn't work, is because A, schools wouldn't fund it, which means the entire activity collapses. But B, no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to debate, right? So education is the internal link to fairness. That's like those are two arguments for each thing. Like obviously there's like 10 billion arguments for fairness, education. Just respond to the line by line. Make sure that your voter is outweighing their voter, and always be clean. Always collapse to one primary voter, and if you want to, like a secondary voter. Okay. Underview. I mean, theories a priori. Drop the debater. So what's important is the underview is how the judge should handle the argument. Competing in terms of reasonability is the judge how the method the judge should evaluate the argument. So they need a competing interp. They need an interp and a counter interp. There's no counter interp. You're comparing the interp versus the status quo. It's like a plan versus a CP or a plan versus the SQO. If you don't have a counter interp, it's very hard to make offense and very hard to make responses because you're always going to be constantly in the defense. Drop the debater. A priori is like it comes before case. It has to evaluate first. And then drop the debater is the implication, right? It's like, if you win the shell, they lose the round, or we win the round. And then no RBIs, obviously, like if they win the shell, if they win the competing interps debate, the debates should still go on because they prove they're not, like if you prove you're not guilty in a court, you don't get like $10 billion, right? The life just goes on. Okay. Case.
Dustin wanted you to go over the POI responses.
Yeah, I made a whole document like back in the day. I don't even know. I had this, right? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, PO is fair. The nature of Parley by the NPDO rulebook, the first. So the argument here is that like, so the like if you read the after specify funding or the after specify an actor, right? And they're like, you should have just asked in a POI, and then we would have told you. This is the response to that. This is I actually liked this response. I actually like Kai. What do you think of this response?
Cool.
Wait, Shanik.
Yeah.
Earlier you said when the neg runs a counter plan, you can just shout like, "Give us the status" and give us a text. So, can you just do that in any case?
So that's a really good point that we've. Okay, wait. Like I don't know. I don't know if we can say this on like the video. But like, yes, there's one exception to which you can shout something out, and that is for text and status. No idea why. I would say it's a bad norm. Hint, hint. Probably something to change. So everything you to probably ask is in a POI, except for text and status for some reason. For some reason, it's judges are fine with you yelling text and status because it's just being taught that way. But we have to break that mindset. Yeah, like this too.
You should share this with the rest of the team.
I literally had this in the file, no?
Yeah, in the file. The one that's shared with like 3 people.
No, so many people have this. Okay, wait.
It's Allegra, Xander, and me.
Wait, who else? Alex, my
Bro,
brother.
Alex is
Oh.
not on the team.
Okay, wait. Okay, here, let me put this somewhere. Where's the POI POC solve? Where can I put this? Oh, I can say like A2 POIs POCs solve. Oh, I should. That's okay. I'll add like links later. It's too many. I'm wanting to go over this later. Here's just now. Okay, let's go over K's. Why not? Okay, the K. The K, very simply put, and there's different types of Ks, which I'm probably not going to get into, but just to say it, there's an epistemological critique, there's an ontological critique, and there's like, I think something else. Anyways, it doesn't really matter too much. It's like performance critiques too. But no, sorry, that's not, okay, scratch that. The critique is very simple. Either there's a couple of reasons to indict the critique. A, something you said was very problematic. Like you said, I don't know, human, I don't know, or say mankind. You said mankind. Okay. You said mankind. Good stuff. Yeah.
That not fall under IVI?
So slippery slope. Yes and no. If I consider a K a fleshed out IVI. So if you really, 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 really want to go for it, like that's that's horrible. That's like terrible. You should lose around. You're reading K. If you're reading like a blip, if you're not reading like a full like length thing and you're not really want to flesh it out, that's an IPI. I think that's a good distinction between the two. But the links would be strong, the weak, because the link is they said mankind, and that's about it. But if there's repeated violations of it, if they say mankind, if they say like something else, I don't know, then yeah, you can indict it. That's one way to indict a critique. The second critique is on the topic itself. So the resolution will act like the US giving aid to Pakistan, perpetuate systems of capitalism. That's one of the links. That's the epistemic link, I think. And no, I'm not even remembering. It doesn't matter. Epistemic ontological links don't matter. Those are like the two most common links. Either the plan results in something bad or used in something pretty terrible. The most common one, 90% of the time, is the plan does something bad. And on the affirmative critique, the link is that it's impossible to affirm the resolution because if we affirm the resolution, we harm this group of people. Thus, vote for us on our scholarship to do this thing instead to help those people. I would say pretty simple to understand. The framework. The framework consists of the roll the ballot, which is usually like some complex, crazy, nuanced stuff, which remember how to beat that by reading a counter roll of the ballot. Thesis of the ideology. So either it's cap, fem, Orientalism, right? And they want to explain it. They're like, okay, Orientalism is the process by which, like, by Eastern cultures get like subsumed by like Western cultures, et cetera, et cetera. This is like manifested in, yeah. So when Eastern cultures, whatever, get destroyed by the West, the links, by doing the plan, this happens, which means Eastern culture gets destroyed, impacts suffering of Eastern people. Alternative, vote for the affirmative. Vote for the negative to create a space or create a debate world where we always vote for Asian people. I don't know. Really chaos or really stupid. It'll be like vote to like center a historical materialist perspective around the ideological ontological principles of epistemic modesty. Like it'll be some random ass bullcrap. Like does not even make sense. But okay. Anyways, that's like the thesis. And then I described the links. How the plan contributes to the ideology, impacts what are bad harms of the ideology spreading. And then alt solvency. What can we do instead? Then perm spikes. Why cannot the AF do this? And usually these are weak reasons. The biggest reason is reps are binding or representations are binding. An argument is that, and also, whenever after they finish reading the alternative, after the neg finishes reading the alt, interrupt and say, Gustav,
X and status.
So you want to get the text of the alternative and you want to get the status of the alternative because the status, the alt, can also be condo. They can kick the alt at any time. And then if you notice here, this looks very much like a disadvantage. So they can just go kick the alt and then the MO read these as disadvantages. It's a very advanced strategy, Most teams cannot handle something like that. But like, yes, that is a very common college strategy. Do the people run multiple Ks? No. Usually, because if you read multiple Ks, then okay. Okay, I guess I have to go soon. I'll finish this up. But no, people don't read multiple Ks because which K would come? What is the internal link? Like, what is the first method you resolve, right? In any sense, doesn't really make sense. You spread yourself thin, right? Like that doesn't make too much sense. But yeah, representations are binding are the argument that because the affirmative backs the plan, they can't perm the alt because they initially told the judge to vote AF for the plan. Thus, they must prove the plan isn't capitalist. The argument is that the response to that is saying that even though reps are binding, we use the state not because we actually want to pass the policy, but because we use the state as a model to learn more about it so that we can actually enact revolutionary alternatives. And then you can read the disadvantages, which I'll talk about later. But that if we abandon the state, because imagine it's the USFG passing policy. If we abandon the state, if we all get out of it, then who takes over the state? It's all the right-wing fascists, which means they control the state and they can crush our movement. Thus, the affirmative, by participating in the state and by participating in the USFG, by passing policy, we get control. We still yield control over the state, so you can do your revolutionary alternative. So you fail without us. Otherwise, you'll get crushed by the Republicans or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, and then they'll go for like layering, structural or procedural. This means structural procedure means they want K impacts before T impacts, the theory impacts. Responding to the K. Counter roll the ballot, like I said earlier, what the counter roll the ballot is, you want to look at way the all-inclusive impacts of the affirmative versus the negative, and the reason is silencing. It's a very strong response. You want to delink yourself from the K. You want to say, we actually don't spread capitalism, and you spread capitalism. So delink and relink. And then you can only impact turn if you're, I would ignore this. Impact turn is saying like capitalism good, Orientalism good. No, probably not going to work. Like bad treatment of women good. Ooh, probably not. Like that's probably a bad way to go. So don't impact turn unless it's a really stupid K. Like it's maybe you can impact turn securitization. Like securitization is actually a good thing. Like the securitization is a K that you're adding more and more and more security. Everyone becomes like afraid and paranoid of everybody around them. You can say securitization is a good thing. I don't know. And you can make their argument, whatever. alternative. You want to perm the alternative. You can say we can do the alternative too. Like we can do your historical materialist perspective too. But the reason why we're better is because we do policy as well. And the disadvantages are because this, whatever, the state criteria movement, the state's inevitable. Okay, I have to go now, but I will pause this recording and I'll get back to this later. But ask me any questions on stuff so far. I'll go back to responding to the K in a bit.
Wait, real quick. Why do it seems like most teams when they perm the K, they do it as a advocacy instead of test of competition. Why do they do that? I feel like it's more strategic to do test of competition.
Yeah, so you can run it as both. I would say like so the reason why is because for example, Timothy Zhu in his paradigm, he says he defaults to perms being advocacies when the neg reads an advocacy. Oh, sorry, that's stupid. Then he defaults to it being an advocacy when it's on the pre-fiat layer. That's just the general default that judges have because they're like, okay, well, you probably want to do this, right? Like, it's probably a bad thing to not do the alternative because we're probably agreeing that capitalism is a bad thing and we both want to solve capitalism. So the strategic motive is to be like, okay, well, we both do it, right? Instead of saying no one does any change at all, because it kind of seems like a jerk move to make. You know what I mean, right? But you can really do both, right? But the argument is the CP is mutually the CP, like, yeah. I mean, you could read it as a test of competition, but then they can just win off the fact that your plan is bad, right? You just when your plan is bad for capitalism, and they don't have a solvency mechanism, but they win a presumption because the affirmative has no plan. But if you read it as an advocacy, you can say the affirmative is able to solve better than the neg because we use the state. I think it's more strategic to use it as an advocacy, but I mean, I could see it working both ways.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna head out now. I'll start another Zoom and I'll keep it recording. Okay, guys, send me questions if you have them. Bye.
All right, bye.